What up? What up? I'm Price Money 718, and this is season 2, episode 2 of the I Gotta Say Something podcast. Today's show is called JLP versus PNP Genocide in Jamaica. Maypen Cemetery is now home to some of the most notorious gangsters who once controlled the streets of Jamaica as enforcers for both the PNP People's National Party and the JLP Jamaica Labour Party in order to maintain influence during election season in exchange for mediocre incentives when you consider what they were being incentivized to do. I'm talking about extortion, voter tampering, and even murder. That's right, these guys would commit all of those acts to secure political control for the party that they represented, and in return, there would be provisions for them to continue their criminal endeavors. As I always say, when you do the devil's job, you get the devil's pay. Lloyd Lester Cope, aka Jim Brown, who was lit on fire while waiting for extradition to the United States from Jamaica, was unfortunately one of those on the payroll of the devil, Edward Seaga, who, despite being born in Boston, Massachusetts, was elected as Jamaica's prime minister in 1980. And though I didn't find anything that says you have to be born in Jamaica to be prime minister, with Bob Marley almost being shot dead during the Seaga administration behind him promoting peace between the two factions, and then receiving a pair of sneakers from a news reporter during a photo shoot who turned out to be CIA agent Bill Moxley, and supposedly those shoes had a nail that was tainted and eventually caused Bob Marley's cancer. Moxley specialized in causing deaths in unusual manners, a couple of them being heart attacks and cancer. Yeah, I said cancer. So with all that, I really can't help but wonder who was really behind a man who was born in Boston, Massachusetts, becoming Prime Minister of Jamaica. Edward Seaga, who was the Minister of Housing and Welfare before becoming a prime minister, had a strong relationship with the residents of Tivoli Gardens, which helped him form a bond with Jim Brown, who became a community leader and enforcer. Jim Brown's political affiliation would eventually land him opportunities in the United States and would also eventually cause him to have to face charges in the United States. Though officials claimed the cause of the fire was unclear, it seemed real strange that while waiting for extradition, the keeper of many of Edward Seaga's dirty secrets was set on fire while waiting to be brought to the United States on drug charges as well as other crimes. Were loose strings being tied up to protect Seaga? Truth be told, many politicians in Jamaica have questionable relationships with criminals, and people in Jamaica have minimal opportunities and come from harsh circumstances that unfortunately cause them to be used as pawns in a game that is deeper than what they know. And for every young man that picks up a firearm on behalf of a political party, there are many to replace him and others to replace them as the vicious cycle continues. As someone who grew up in both Hanover and St. Mary, Jamaica, and is very familiar with life in Jamaica, a majority of the residents are fishermen, cab drivers, construction workers, and vendors who struggle to rise above the poverty line with adversities such as inflation and political bias, which also takes a toll economically on a lot of people on the island. For example, the People's National Party, PNP, hasn't had a prime minister in power since P.J. Patterson, who was prime minister around 1996, making the JLP Jamaica Labour Party a superpower in Jamaica due to the fact that they have more of an economically elite connection that continues to land them in power, which leaves PNP supporters who are searching for employment subject to biased employers. So in other words, if you are a supporter of the PNP and you go on a construction site or any job where the employer is a JLP supporter or representative, more than likely, you will not get the job. And in addition to political bias in the workforce, deportation, which is like having a felony or worse, is also a major key in unemployment for a lot of the populace, which usually causes people to seek employment within political factions as enforcers, which ultimately is a scheme to eradicate the melanated population of the island and give more control to colonizers. Unfortunately, there's a growing population of political enforcers in cemeteries across the island. Pnp versus JLP, the genocide in Jamaica. I'm Price Money 718. Thank you for tuning in to Season 2, Episode 2 on the I Gotta Say Something podcast. The content is free, so if you want to see similar videos, click the link and follow me.